The trick to writing a really strong scene is knowing which questions to ask. As a professional editor, that's one of the most important parts of my job. It's not about having all the answers or knowing everything about storytelling. It's about knowing which questions to ask to get to the heart of things, to reach the real soul of the story and to expose issues. Right now, I'm going to teach you some of these important questions. Just knowing to ask these things will help you understand your story so much more deeply. You'll be able to spot issues in your writing and deepen your scenes in a way that really helps readers connect. Before we get into the questions, take a deep breath. You've made it to the Writing Woods. It is an absolutely gorgeous East Tennessee morning. The sun is rising through the trees. If y'all have been to the Writing Woods before, you know there is no stress here. There are no distractions. There are no emails or text messages. We're just talking about writing and storytelling and enjoying the journey. We're going to dive right into it today. I've got some questions here that I'm going to ask and not answer because that's your job today. You're going to answer these not just for your story, but for each individual scene. So I work in Scrivener, and so I have kind of the notes on the right, and I like to answer a few of these important questions there so that I can keep an eye on it and keep it in my mind while I'm writing the scene. Because it's really easy to just get lost in your scene, in your story, and forget the big overarching things that you were supposed to be focusing on and weaving in organically. If you don't remember to have these things in your mind while you're writing, then what ends up happening is you dump it like an info dump rather than threading it through the scene naturally. So there are a ton of different ways you could do that. Like I say, I love Scrivener. You could also just have a Post-it note on your desk. You could write it on a whiteboard. You could do tons of different things. Whatever helps you remember, hey, I need to be thinking about this while I'm writing, not afterward. Okay, question number 1. We're starting with the core stuff. What is each character's goal? What does each character want in this scene? If they get this thing, they're going to be happy, or at least feel accomplished. What goal are their actions trying to reach? And notice I said each character, because a lot of the time we forget that our protagonist isn't the only piece on the board. What does our antagonist want? What do our minor characters want? Because if there's no goal that they're trying to reach, then there's no reason for the reader to read, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to answer that question as we're turning pages. Are they going to get what they want? And when you have multiple characters with potentially conflicting goals, then that's when it really gets interesting. That's when we start introducing that conflict. So that's question number 1. What does each character want? What is their goal? Number 2, we're still in the core stuff. What is each character's obstacle? What is standing in the way of that character achieving the goal that we just mentioned? It could be something external. Maybe they want to get to the Writing Woods and their car's broken down. It could be something internal. Maybe they want to get to the Writing Woods, but they're afraid of snakes. We do have snakes out here. We have plenty of critters, deer and coyotes and squirrels. The loudest creatures in the Writing Woods are definitely squirrels. So what is each character's obstacle? And their obstacle could be another character. We just talked about the fact that your characters may have conflicting goals. So in that case, they might become obstacles for each other. And I know this is real simple stuff, but really think about it. How often do you specifically identify each of these things for each scene? Not for your story as a whole, for each individual scene that you're writing. And sometimes these things will be the same as they are for the story. If the scene is focused on your primary conflict, then the answers to these questions may be the same for the story and the scene. But sometimes they're different. Your story's going to have a bunch of different conflicts in there. And if you don't know exactly what you are writing toward during the course of your scene, then it's going to go off track. It's going to wind up being fuzzy, and you're not going to have this good, specific, concrete conflict for the reader to grab onto and really get interested in. All right, number 3, we're still in the big 3 for conflict. What are the stakes for each character? So for each character, they want something, something's in the way. Now, what is the worst case scenario if they do not achieve that goal? You want to get to the Rottenwoods, but your car's broken down. If you don't make it, then you're going to be sad and stressed all day, and you're not going to have a good writing session that day. Oh, that's not true. I know y'all are having great writing sessions, even when you're not hanging out with me here. Let's say instead of the Rottenwoods, your character needs to get their sister to the hospital, but the car's broken down and there's no cell service. So goal is get their sister to the hospital. Obstacles are broken down car and no cell service. So if they don't overcome those obstacles and achieve that goal of getting to the hospital, then possibly their sister could die. But if we don't have those stakes, if there is no worst case scenario for if the character does not meet their goal, then the reader just doesn't care. Whether they do or don't meet their goal, nothing changes. The story progresses the same way it would otherwise. There's no reason to be interested in that. There's no reason to be invested. And I could talk for probably all morning about stakes, but for now, let's say that when you're looking at stakes, it's important that they are high enough and specific. So honestly, the example that I gave before was a good example of stakes that were not specific enough. If you need to make it to the Rottenwoods and you don't, you're going to be sad all day. Okay, well, it's not really concrete. It's not specific. I don't feel that in my heart, you know? But stakes like your sister dying, that's very specific. Stakes like you'll never come back to the Rottenwoods again, that's specific. So sometimes when we're thinking about stakes, we hone in on something and think we've got it. But if we pushed it just a little bit further, we could get to the really specific stakes that are going to land with the reader. I see this a lot with writers thinking too broadly, especially in genres like fantasy and sci-fi, where the events could impact the entire world of the story. So the stakes could be something like the world descends into darkness. Okay, those are high stakes, but they're not specific. And usually, when that's the case, I find it really helpful to nudge the writer toward thinking about the stakes for the specific character, often the internal stakes. So we have these kind of broad general stakes for the world as a whole. But what's at stake for your protagonist? How will they feel? So I'm going to cut myself off right there, but if y'all want some more in-depth discussion about stakes, then I can and most likely will do that in a future episode. So now that we've covered the big three for conflict, what each character wants, what's in their way, and what is at stake if they fail, the next question is what motivates each character. They want something. Why? Why do they want it? What is driving them toward that goal? Maybe it's something in their past. Maybe it has something to do with who they are or how they see themselves. And this could tie in with the stakes pretty easily, but really think about what is motivating them. Because that can be the difference between a story where it feels like the characters are just going through the motions versus a story that feels real and deep and important. You know, when you read a book and it just kind of feels like a board game, you know, the characters are just moving step by step, but we don't really have a sense of why, so it just seems very surface level compared to something very deep where the characters feel almost like they're moving through water and we're down in the depths with them and we can feel the currents around us and the characters responding to those, and as we're moving forward it feels earned and it feels real. And a lot of that feeling has to do with whether the author has a good sense of the character's motivation. And again, this is for all of your characters, not just your protagonists. And a lot of times thinking about character motivations will expose issues in your story, in your plot. Sometimes when we're planning, we just think of it from our protagonist's perspective and we design the plot based on that without really considering whether it makes sense for the antagonist and the minor characters. And if we think about that, we can notice those things earlier, which is always better to catch it early and be able to adjust. Question number 5, along the same lines, what is each character afraid of? So we talked about what motivates them, what they're running toward. Now, what are they running away from? What are they scared of? And with this, I really like to think about both the things that the character is aware of and the things that the character is not aware of. Oftentimes, the thing that your character is in denial about, those can be the real catalysts. So what are your character's worst fears? What are they afraid of? What are they afraid might happen? And that could have to do with the stakes. Those could be one and the same. But also, what are they afraid of facing? What truths are they scared to look at? A lot of the time, that is what the story is really about. What truth, what belief is your character in denial about, is afraid to look at, doesn't want to see? And throughout the course of the story, how do they face that and then overcome it? Those are the big questions about your characters. So answer those. Answer them for each character and keep them somewhere you can see them and remind yourself of what you're really writing for each scene. Rather than just the surface level events, but what's going on underneath. How are the characters feeling? And what is really driving this scene? What's the engine behind it? Because when we're talking about character-driven stories, that's what we're talking about. Next question, how does this scene relate to the primary conflict? Is it directly related? Are your characters' goals, obstacles, stakes in line with the primary conflict? Are they the same thing? Or are they different? Does this have to do with a subplot or a mini conflict that's going to lead into the primary conflict? It should relate back to the primary conflict somehow, even if it's not the same. Everything should be driving, funneling toward that primary conflict. And remember, when we're talking about conflict, all that means is your character wants something, something is in the way, and there's something at stake if they fail. Goal plus obstacle plus stakes equal conflict. Okay, number 7, what question does the reader want answered during this scene? Y'all, people are simple. We're not. We're very complicated, actually. But this one thing about people is simple anyway. We like answers. We don't like questions. We don't like posed questions without an answer. If we see a jigsaw puzzle with one piece missing, we want to fill in that piece. And I know you've probably experienced your brain doing that for you sometimes. How often have you been proofreading and there's a word missing and your brain just fills it in for you and you skip right over it? We like that feeling of completion, of wholeness. If a question is posed, if a loop is opened, we want to close it. We want to get that answer. If you remember that while you're writing, during the course of your story and your individual scenes, you can really keep readers engaged and turning pages because there's always something that they are trying to answer. For your scene, what question has been posed but not answered? What is the reader reading to find out? A lot of the time, this has to do with your character's goals. So they might be reading to find out, are they going to reach their goals? Are the stakes going to be realized? This could also be a more literal question. Think about in a mystery, we're reading to find out who done it. Maybe there's information held back from the reader that they want to be able to complete the picture. This can take so many different forms, but just ask yourself very simply, what question is the reader trying to answer? And if you can't spot a question like that, then you maybe have given too much information or not introduced enough conflict into your scene. You also might have given away the answer too early. If you start the scene with a question, give away the answer somewhere in the middle, and then continue on feeling like you're kind of wrapping up the scene, the reader might get bored because the reason that they were reading has been fulfilled. You've answered their question. So what reason do they have to remain engaged? That is a biggie. If you're going to pick a few of these questions so far to really make sure you have available during every scene, the first 3 about goals, obstacles, stakes, huge. And then this one, honestly, this is a really big question and element for every single scene that you write. The next question, what changes during this scene? A story should be building and growing and moving towards something. And if you're staying in one place, then the story isn't progressing. Something should be changing. It could be internal. It could be the way the characters are seeing themselves or the world around them or somebody else. It could be the character's belief system, or it could be external. It could be circumstances, the removal or introduction of obstacles. But at the end of each scene, you should be in a different place than where you started. If nothing changes during the course of the scene, then as an editor, I would be questioning whether that scene is necessary. And I would be looking at either removing it or combining it with another scene. If nothing changes, then it's probable that the scene has another purpose, whether it be character development or imparting exposition or information that you feel the reader needs. And either one of those things can easily be combined with other scenes, can be woven in. And a lot of the time with those things, the placement of them in the story is not as important. So usually it's pretty easy to kind of evaluate, okay, what are we really getting out of this scene? And taking that positive and applying it elsewhere. And that's, of course, something that we would be looking at during the revision stage. But by asking these questions while you're writing, you might notice that earlier and either adjust and go ahead and move or combine that scene. Or you might update the scene so that something does change. Maybe there is an opportunity to really push your story forward, but you're just not taking it. So what changes during the course of the scene? Also, we want to think about setting. How does the setting impact this scene? Would it be different if we moved the scene to a different physical location? Setting is so important, and sometimes it really just gets lost and we wind up with those floating heads. You know, when you have characters talking or doing something and we don't really feel them in a space. I mean, how would this be different if I was not sitting in the woods right now? I could be sitting somewhere else, talking to you fine folks, drinking the same cup of tea, but I wouldn't feel the sun on me right now. I wouldn't feel the damp log under my skin. And I'd venture to say that this whole thing would probably be a little bit different. I wouldn't be as comfortable, right? Because I love being in the woods. This is where I feel good. This is where I feel at home. So I'd probably be speaking a little bit differently. My body language might be different. I might be less relaxed. So think about the setting. Think about the sensory information. What are your characters feeling, hearing? Right now, I hear the wind rustling the fall leaves. I smell the earthy scents. And how does the setting change the way that your characters behave or interact? If you find that the setting really doesn't matter, I would challenge you to either think about ways that it does matter that you're just not seeing, or move it somewhere else. If you feel like the setting doesn't matter, maybe it's not the right setting. 3 more questions, y'all. How does each character respond emotionally? In each scene, we have things happening, right? Events are taking place. Things are happening either to your character or your character is making things happen. Your character's going to have feelings about this. They're going to have an emotional response. And sometimes our tendency, especially when we're really thinking about the plot and the events and what's next and where are we going, is to forget or glaze over how these events really impact the character. Do they feel sad, scared, joyful? And are they feeling those emotions, or are they burying them down deep? Either way, it's going to make an impact. It's going to make a difference. And your character is going to respond to that. They're going to respond to their feelings. So you can go real internal with this. You can reflect and dig into how the character is feeling, or you can really show the reader through body language, through actions. And I'm a big proponent of that. I think that goes a long way and it feels more real to the reader. But in most stories, you're going to wind up doing a combination of both. For the purposes of this exercise, we are really just working on identifying those feelings, how they're responding emotionally, and then how you actually incorporate that information into the scene is kind of step number 2. So really think about your character's emotional response and think about whether it is natural. Are they responding in a way that aligns with their character with their values, with their internal belief system. Think about the motivations and the fears that we nailed down earlier, and now compare those to the emotional response to the situation or events. Ask yourself if it makes sense. Next question, is this scene at the right place in the story? Should it come earlier, later? Have we set up the necessary context for this scene to land? And again, this is really something to be thinking about during pre-writing and revision, not quite as much when you're writing, but you can really think about and potentially list what elements have you set up already that are gonna make this scene hit for the reader, and be thinking about those. Let those affect you as you're writing in the same way that they affect your characters and the reader. And the last question for each scene is, what emotion should the reader feel? This is kind of a tightrope because in my experience, you don't want to think about it too much. I think focusing more on the character's emotions will naturally impart emotions to the reader, but it is a good thing to be aware of. How should your reader feel after they have finished the scene? This might not be the same as the way your characters feel, depending on your POV, your narrator. There could be a disconnect between the feelings of the character and the overall perspective of the story. Let's say the scene focuses on your antagonist and they're getting their just desserts. Well, they probably don't feel too happy about that, but your reader might at that point feel some pretty strong satisfaction and a sense of validation for themselves, for the protagonist. So do think about how your reader should feel and maybe make a note of that. It could be good later to compare to your beta reader's feedback. And I find all of this is really just easier to do while you're writing than to try to go back and sort through it. It's nice once you finish your draft to already have this information broken down for each scene. So those are the questions that I would ask for every single scene that you write. It's fantastic to have this somewhere that you can see it and reference it, so that you can weave it naturally through your scene rather than just dumping it in certain spots. You can come back to this, of course, as you're writing your scenes. If you need a refresher, come back, go through these questions and ask them again. And I will also put a link in the description to a printable worksheet with these questions. And really focusing on these as you're writing, for me, it makes a huge difference. I feel steadier. I feel more focused with each scene. I feel grounded, and it makes my writing feel more organic, more real. And of course, it's great to have later when you're going back through revisions and editing and trying to remember what the heck you were thinking when you wrote that scene 3 months ago. So I hope these questions help you as much as they've helped me. And when I am editing, I ask these questions the whole time during developmental edits and manuscript critiques. I am constantly asking these questions, and if I can't answer them, then that is an indication that there's something that might need to be looked at, fixed, deepened. Like I say, it's not about having all the answers. It's just about having the right questions. All right, y'all, thanks for hanging out with me in the Rotten Woods. It's been a lovely morning and I'm sad to go, but I'll see you next time. The woods will still be here waiting for us.